Thank you for listening to The Horse Show with Rick Lamb. If you have a question, request, or comment, we want to hear from you. Our fax number is area code 602-279-0980. Or if you would like to email us, the address is lambemail@aol.com. Now, back to Rick.
Welcome back, everybody. Coming to you from the Whoop Whoop Ranch in central Arizona. My guest is my new friend, Rose Miller. Rose, welcome back to The Horse Show.
Thank you very much, Rick.
I feel extra lucky today. I get to double dip you.
That's wonderful.
And what we're going to talk about this time is your interest and involvement with mules. How did that happen?
Well, that is a story. My first book was about my Tennessee walkers, and at the end I gave a wrap of my stallion, Praise Hallelujah, and how wonderful he had done, and all the breeding we'd done, and all the things he'd won. And then he decided to retire because he just got too nervous when we took him to the shows. He'd fret when we showed for many years. We took him and his mares that he bred. He was wonderful. And then he got to where when we take the mares out to show him, he'd just spin around in his stall, and so we had to retire him. And soon after that, I did geld him. So the show business at my end was kind of waning down. My good friend Erica, who was a young lady that homeschooled, was able to come to the farm and work with me. The reason it was important she homeschooled is I'm a morning person, so I do all my hard work in the morning, and she could come by 3:30 when other kids are out of school. I'm done. Yeah. So anyway,
she was homeschooling your kids?
No, she was homeschooled. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
She is a teenager, homeschooled.
Oh, I see.
So she was able to come out to the farm.
Young person to help you around the farm.
My kids had left by then. They decided they had other interests, and so it was like, okay, now what? So she appeared at my doorstep, and it was just absolutely wonderful. And she lives out here in Flagstaff now with her husband, who works for some part of the government who does work in the Grand Canyon. I don't remember what exactly, but anyway, so now we're close again. She got married on the farm on her horse, and then she moved. So it's like, okay, now I've got nothing. My stallion is retired. I gelded him. He's not even a stallion anymore. My mares, I'm showing the mares, and we're having fun, but we're not promoting anything. We're not really doing anything. Right. So we had a young man who came to live with us over 25 years ago. His name was Bob. We met him through a mutual friend. He came out to finish his MBA at the Purdue Extension that we have in South Bend. And no, it was Indiana University, I'm sorry. So anyway, he came out and he loved the farm, and after he got his degree, he just decided to stay. So we had another.
And you were okay with this?
Oh, lovely young man, same age as our children, and he loved the farm, and he didn't mind helping. Now, when you have a horse farm, things are always breaking. You got to keep working. So he was just absolutely wonderful. So we just adopted each other. We call him our son, and So anyway, in 2006, he said, I love the Grand Canyon. I've hiked it 5 times. I want to share it with you. Obviously, you're not going to hike it, but would you like to ride the mules down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and so forth? I just had a really bad horse accident. I'd wrecked my knee, and I didn't know whether I could. He said, well, we have to make it, a year in advance. Yeah. So, and if you can't go, we'll just cancel it. So I said, okay. So we did, and we ended up going and ended up having an absolutely lovely time. The first part of the book is about my mule ride, and I had a mule called Charlie. Now, Charlie is the reason that I think the mule book is really interesting. And, by the way, the Bright Angel gift shop now carries my book.
Oh, neat.
Yes. And there are pictures.
Which Bright Angel is one of the trails. And
yes.
At the Grand
going
Canyon.
down the Grand Canyon.
I think probably the most popular, most widely used one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the one that goes down, and it's easier. The Kaibab comes up on the other side, and that is more stressful. Yep. Well, Charlie was a lovely mule, but he was the darn slowest mule. And so, I often wondered, Bob and I were the last ones to get our mule, and I wish I could, it's like, how did you pair me up with this mule? But anyway.
It was fate somehow. It was meant to be.
But he was so slow that, one of the cardinal rules is you've got to stay on the butt of the other mule. You can't have a straggly line. You've got to be a close, compact group for safety. Charlie was not having any of that. So he would lag, and he would go slower and slower and slower. And at first, I could tap strap him, and they give you this switch called the motivator, and you're supposed to whack your mule to keep it going, you know. Well, you know, mules, pretty soon it's like, I don't feel that anyway, so why are you doing it? But at first he did. He'd catch up and he'd trot. We'd get behind and I'd tell him to go and he'd trot. Well, the way they selected us, they had the 3 women, there were 6 in our group. 3 women went first. I was the last woman, and then the 3 guys came. Well, when Charlie held up the group, of course he held up the guys. So when Charlie trotted, their mules trotted too. I don't think they were too happy about trotting.
Oh, they didn't want to trot?
No, it's bouncy.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I think a trotting mule is even more bouncy than a horse. So eventually we got down to the bottom, but we did lag behind, and I apologized at one of the rest stops that we had, and he said, "Oh, Charlie always does that. He always slows down the thing." And I said, "Well, I am a rider." I said, you know, he said, "Okay, fine, I won't worry about you." But then one of the other guys said, "Well, do we have to stay in this order, or can we change order and ride with our wives?" So I don't know whether that was what happened, but Bob and I ended up at the very tail end. It's like, we're forgetting you guys. So then at the end, Charlie's going slower and slower, and so Bob and I are lagging further and further behind. Eventually, we do make it down to Phantom Ranch. So I'm worried about coming up. It's like, oh, Lord, you know, we were so slow going down. What is it going to be like going up? I felt so sorry for Charlie. I mean, you know, these mules do this all the time, and it's just like, I'm going to get there. Don't worry about it. But we were like 10, 12 mule lengths behind everybody. And there was nothing I could do, nothing. Such a feeling of futility.
Going up as well?
Going up was worse.
Oh.
It was just like I thought.
Well, it's interesting because did he not become a little anxious when he got too separated?
No, not a bit.
So he didn't have that kind of herd-bound behavior.
And that's what, of course, the wrangler was worried about, was if you lag behind, then your mule will get nervous.
Excited, and he wants to go real fast.
No, Charlie never did that. So anyway, the first part of the book, and it was interesting because I could write the Grand Canyon story from the viewpoint of riding a slowpoke mule. It wasn't just like I went down, I saw the views, we had dinner at Phantom Ranch, we turned around and came up.
You had more time to look around, I suppose.
Well, lots of time.
So moral of that story, get a slow mule if you want to see more scenery.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, I did appreciate how careful he was. I would never ride my horses down the Grand Canyon. Obviously, they're show horses for one thing. But I mean, they do go right up to the edge on some of these switchbacks, and then they have to turn around and go the other way. And they were so careful. I mean, you're like pointed out over nowhere.
Yeah.
And I felt perfectly safe. There wasn't anything I was worried about. It's just that we were slow. So I was able to write the first part of the mule book as a personal interest story, and Charlie was the star.
Okay.
So anyway, we get back to Indiana, and I'm in love with mules. My show career is done. I don't have anybody to help me anymore.
All on the basis of this one mule?
Yeah.
Pretty much,
Yeah,
huh?
pretty much.
Okay.
So I decided to start buying mules. So I went down to the big mule show. This was in 2007. And Shelbyville had a big mule show.
Shelbyville, Tennessee?
Yes, as well as a horse show. They at the same place, they had a big mule show.
And then where the Tennessee Walking Horse Celebration is each year, too?
Yes.
Okay.
And so
Are you going to tell me you got a walking mule?
Yeah, I did.
Oh. Sorry, I had to jump ahead because now I see the whole picture.
Yes. So I was bound and determined I was coming back with a mule, by golly. And I spent a fortune for him, more than I should have. But gated mules are hard to find. They're much harder because you can breed gated jack to gated walking horse or Pasifino, and you don't always get gait. So they are more expensive. Yeah. So I paid a lot of money, and his name was Samson. And so then I write about Samson, bringing him home, and in our story about how you get along with mules or you don't get along. But that is the premise of the book, and why it's named Mules, Mules, and More Mules, because I would buy a mule and it wouldn't work out. I was too old. I didn't want to try to train it. Training mules took more education than I had because they're not a horse. And so I would sell it to a good home and get another one. So that's how come the title ended up.
That's a tough thing for a lot of people to do. And a lot of people stay with the wrong animal, horse or mule or whatever, because they can't release sort of the emotional aspect.
Thank you for saying that, because I also wrote in the book, it didn't work for me, but everyone that I sold worked fine for the person that got it.
Well, and that's an important thing, bit of perspective for people who are in that position. If a horse or mule or whatever isn't working out for you, it might be better for him or her to go on to another situation. When we kind of thinned our own herd down, both of the horses that we one we sold and one we gave away, they went to much better situations, meaning that they got ridden more, they got used more.
Right.
And weren't just kind of standing around in our pasture, you know.
Right.
So anyway, good on you for that.
My guest is Rose Miller, author of Mules, Mules, and More Mules. And when we get back, she will address the difference between horses and mules. Very important information you're going to get right here on The Horse Show in just a moment.
The Horse Show with Rick Lamb is a copyrighted production of Lamb Chop Studios, Phoenix, Arizona. Unauthorized use is strictly prohibited.
Finish Line, the next generation in horse fence.
It's actually a monofilament from the polyester family.
Finish Line is as strong as wire, but 7 times lighter and safer for horses.
It is designed to give 20% and then go immediately back to its original tension.
No wire fence springs back like Finish Line.
That flex is what really keeps the horses safe.
Learn more at finishlinefence.com. Strong, lightweight, easy to install, and safe for horses. finishlinefence.com.
Pretty much you put it up and forget about it.
For the past 11 years, I have been on an incredible journey. I have learned so much about horses, and I'd like to share that with you. I've written a new book called Human to Horseman, A Journey of Discovery, Growth, and Celebration. Now, in this book, I share my insights, the experiences I've had, the teachers that I've learned from. It's a great way to get started with natural horsemanship. $24.95 in hardcover, and I'll be happy to sign it for you. Human to Horseman. Order it at thehorseshow.com or by calling 877-THE-HORSE.
Horses need grain.
Not true. Research has shown that equine grain-associated disorders can be a threat to domestic horses. That's why Glow for Life feeds from ADM Alliance Nutrition go against the grain with premium low-starch, high-fat, high-fiber formulations to feed horses the way they're meant to eat, for life. For a limited time, get a free customized feeding plan for your horse at growstrong.com. That's GROstrong.com.
Every month, there's hands-on advice from the pros in Horse and Rider, the how-to magazine for Western riding. Call now and get 2 years for the price of one, just $24. 1-800-829-3340.
In November's Horse and Rider, you'll get holiday gift suggestions from $5 to $500, tips on avoiding common horse care blunders, and ways to keep your boots looking new. Subscribe to Horse and Rider today and save. Call 1-800-829-3340. Jeffers is the best equine catalog with more than 25,000 items, same-day free shipping, and the lowest prices guaranteed. Don't forget your fall bot and tapeworm control. Stock up now with Equimax, the only dewormer FDA approved for all horses, including pregnant mares and foals 1 month and older. Buy 4 Equimax right now and get one free, only at Jeffers Equine. Call 1-800-JEFFERS or visit jeffersequine.com. Jeffers Equine, earning your trust right here in America since 1975.
My name's Terry Poston. I've worked at Keystone for 33 years, worked here all my life, earned a good living. If we invest in America, then I keep working. It's good for our economy. It's good for everybody. I see red brand tags that I put on fence when I started 33 years ago, still hanging on fences. I like to be able to say, hey, I come from the plant where I work.
We know what's in your fence, and we've got the steel to prove it.
The wait is over. You can now get the audio version of Human to Horseman. 5 hours on 4 standard audio CDs, just $24.95. Visit thehorseshow.com to order.
The Horse Show with Rick Lamb is here every week at this time. So tell a friend.
We do appreciate it. Just direct people to my website, folks, thehorseshow.com. We'd love to have them join our online community and share their thoughts. My guest today is Rose Miller, author of Mules, Mules, and More Mules. Tell us more about Samson the Mule.
Somewhere along the line, Samson got the idea that he owned the farm and he was going to run it, and that included me. And if I couldn't put him out first or wouldn't, he just had a hissy fit. He actually became somewhat dangerous. I mean, it's like open up the door and he's coming out. And I was a young gentleman who was of Amish descent who left the Amish faith, but he was a born horse person. Yeah. Eli's really an interesting person. trained his first buggy horse when he was like 7, and the horse ended up in a ditch, and his mom forbade him to ever do it again. I said, Eli, how long did that last? He said, about a week. He's one of those fellas, that he naturally, intuitively just knew what to do and did the right thing. Well, he started doing the Pirelli thing, but he also did his own intuitive thing. Yeah. So I had him come out and help me, and we worked. He'd work with Samson, then I'd work with him. So I write about that in the book. So it's a little bit about like what we did. And because he was just too big and strong for me to deal with.
That's a big mule.
And mules are stronger. Man, I tell you what, they get that head bent just a little bit in one direction, and they can take off much more so than a horse would.
So do you even try and use the one-rein stop in an emergency?
Yes, but I just like them to stop. Yeah.
However you
yeah. So anyway.
Well, so much of that is going to that before they are really in the mode of taking off, because then they've got all that momentum going.
Once they're in the mode, I just don't know.
Hold on.
No, you're right.
To people that don't know psychologically how horses and mules differ, how do you explain the difference?
Well, they are more dog-like, and I read this, and I agree. Because
mules are more dog-like.
They want a relationship with you. They want to love you. They want to be special. And that's why if you get a special mule, it's a treasure. Whereas horses, I think, yes, they like to be your friends, but, they're okay if they're not. And mules tend to buddy up more, so they're going to buddy up with another mule, or they'll buddy up with you. So you want to be somewhere in that, pretty close where they really like you.
Yeah.
Getting back to, I mentioned Mark Rashid earlier in my horse book, but he's with this passive leadership.
Yep.
And I love that when I read it. And I think that is really important with a mule, maybe more so than a horse, because they do not take browbeating.
Mules do not.
No, and it's so much better if you can be diplomatic, still get what you need done, but you're just more of a passive leader. I think that's quite important.
Make sure everybody's with us on what we're saying here. The passive leader concept is the animal in the herd that kind of leads by example. He doesn't assert his dominance over other individuals. They just kind of gravitate towards recognizing him, and that passive leader can be in addition to a regular alpha leader in a herd. I mean, there can be a most dominant horse in that herd.
Absolutely, right.
And then there's this sort of passive leader. And the way Mark describes it, it's the one that the horses want to be with rather than feel like they have to follow.
Right, or get out of the way when she comes.
Yeah.
And I got one of those over there too. I mean, she's definitely the alpha mare and puts those ears back, and the mules, everybody moves out of her way.
Were you able to use any of your insights on training mules to make you better as a horsewoman?
Absolutely, because I had to learn more patience.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm a type A personality. Want it done now, want it done maybe yesterday. And I realized I had to take my time and, go more slowly and just let them kind of say, okay, I understand, I'm ready.
Yeah.
They are less forgiving than a horse. If you get them into a bad situation, if you bog a mule down in a muddy place, you can just forget about getting him to go back in a place like that. He absolutely won't. And that's where they get the idea of being stubborn, but they're not. They're like thinking. It's like, yeah, I remember that.
Well, the thing, too, I think when you talk about mules, you have to acknowledge that they've got donkey in them. And donkeys, do you understand the mule better by understanding where they came from? Horses and donkeys. Donkeys psychologically different. They developed in different terrain. Mountainous terrain. That's why the donkey has this well-developed freeze instinct when he's frightened. Horses typically will take flight when they're frightened.
Right.
Both are kind of their first line of defense. The freeze over here, the running away over here. Well, then the mule gets both of those things kind of mixed up in his brain, so you never quite know which one he's going to do. And when he freezes, a lot of people think he's just being stubborn. But he may be just trying to figure it out.
Right. In fact, I had this happen just the other day. I was riding my old arthritic mule, who I don't ride a whole lot, and I had a fly mask on her because now that the monsoon season's here, we have flies in the face and so forth. So and it was the first time I'd ridden her with it. And we went fine up the road past this big mud puddle, but when we turned around to come back, she just put on the brakes. And she just looked at that mud puddle and she wanted to turn around, and it's like, no, and the home's not that way. So eventually we got by it, just very gently talking to her and so forth, and she did. But that's the difference.
Yeah.
And she probably, I don't think it would have bothered her if she hadn't had the fly mask on, but that did just enough difference. She wasn't sure what it was.
Now, do you drive any of the mules that you have?
No, I had a bad experience with a horse runaway with a hay rake when I was younger.
Oh.
So I have a mental block against that.
Because that is when you train mules in particular to drive, but I think this is also true of horses. You do want to cultivate that freeze instinct. So if something goes wrong, that they don't take flight, that they do freeze.
And I wouldn't mind learning more about how to teach an animal to do that freeze and to stay frozen until you tell them it's okay.
That's right.
Because what happens is they'll freeze for an instant, look at it, and decide I'm turning around going the other way.
So, have you kind of made the transition? Are you a full-time mule person now as opposed to a horse?
Well, I brought 2 horses out with us. Praise Hallelujah, the old ex-stud, and his daughter, Sunday Praise, who is an excellent show horse and one of the most beautiful walking horses you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And I trail ride her, and she geared down from being a big-time show horse to just being happy to go on the trail. But she doesn't watch where she's going. She gawk off this way and gawk off that way and stumble over the rock right in her way. She's used to cultivated paths in the show ring, and it's like, who put that rock there? Whereas the mules are so wonderful. I mean, they go along, they see the rock, they walk over it. But so I've got 3 mules we brought. One for Bob, my son, and the old arthritic mule who I paid a lot for, and I call her my most expensive rescue mule.
Yeah.
And then Susie Q, who is my favorite, and Miss Perfect. I mean, sometimes in a lifetime, you're so fortunate to get an animal like Susie, and I'm so glad I have her.
Now, is she gated?
She's gated.
Yeah. So what kind of a gait does she do?
Okay, now the gated mules, though, they do the show thing with the mules now, and I hear that they're soaring them. And I never would have imagined that was possible to soar a mule. I thought, no, you will never soar a mule because they will know what you're doing to them, but they don't soar them that way. They soar them with pressure shoeing and different things that the mule's got no idea what's happening. So if they pressure shoe an animal, there are different ways to do it, but for the audience to know.
Tacks or ball bearings or something
under the shoe,
causes pain when they put weight on the foot.
Right. So now they're getting big going gated mules, but they also have their trail mules and so forth.
But the one that you have that's so special to you that is gated, is it kind of a running walk type of a thing?
Well, that's what I'm getting to. My mules do not have a fast running walk or a show gait. What they do is they have their slow mule walk, and then they have a little bit faster speed, which would be like a little jog trot. And you're not covering a lot of ground, but it's not bouncy, and you could do it all day.
Yeah. Good. My guest has been Rose Miller, and her website is rosemiller.net. And the book we've been talking about is Mules, Mules, and More Mules. All right. Thank you so much, Rose.
Thank you.
And there you have it, my friends. Special thanks to my guest today, Susan Love. If you would like to learn more about mounted archery, her website is mountedarcheryofiowa.com. She has a chapter there of the Mounted Archery Association of the Americas, or MA3. And you could learn more there. I think it sounds like a pretty fun sport. I would certainly like to try it someday. Who knows, we might even make a TV show out of that. Thanks also to Rose Miller for joining us again. Her website, rosemiller.net. The book we talked about today is Mules, Mules, and More Mules. She also has a book about her experience with Tennessee walking horses, and that's called The Horse That Wouldn't Trot. And Rose's story is kind of inspiring, actually. She was not a professional writer going into this. She did not go to a big publishing house and get a contract in advance and all that. She just was somebody who felt she had a story to tell, experiences that people might enjoy reading about and even learn something from. And so she wrote the book and published it herself, both of these books. And, I did the same sort of thing with my book, Human to Horseman. And like my buddy Mark Rashid, that she admires too, who does such a good job of telling personal stories and kind of that have teaching moments in them about horsemanship, I try to do the same thing with my book, Human to Horseman. And when you do this, it's kind of cathartic in a sense because you're sharing a part of you and in a lot of cases the mistakes that you made and what you learned out of that. And I think people enjoy reading about that or listening to it. And so what I encourage people is if you feel inclined to do that, if you feel you have something to say, and most importantly, if you enjoy writing. Some people don't really enjoy that. I love writing. I know Rose enjoys writing. Mark loves writing. If you do, and you have something to say, why not say it? I mean, we live in a different time now. Self-publishing is possible. Printing on demand is possible. The internet has changed everything. So if you're interested, just, Google self-publishing or printing on demand, whatever, and you can learn everything you need to know that way.